So moving to your plan, this is my general design for my building. As a refresher, mine was a mix of large glass windows. You can see books, uses wood from the forest. Library rises above the tree line with an observation relaxation nook where you can stop to read. Has a Mies van der Rohe aesthetic, small pathway and sheltered walkway. So those are sort of my guiding principles. Mies van der Rohe uses a lot of these columns. I liked my sort of honeycomb design, and you've got this little observation tower on top. So there's a lot of different ways about going about this. I might want, if I'm starting to think about how I want this side over here. Let me come up. I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit so I can see it over here. With this one, I want to show this side as the front, or the side. Sorry, this is going to be my main side view facing sort of the audience, and this is going to be the other side. That's going to be sort of our point. So this point right here is going to be almost my midpoint in my scene. Everything that goes here is going to be towards the right side of my image, and this over here is going to be my left side. This will be my midpoint, right? And the way that I'm thinking about it is my horizon line might be about here because I want to see above. Actually, I might make it a little bit bigger, a little bit lower, because I want to see above into this space. I sort of drew mine into perspective a little bit already, but I want to see above this space, and I want to see that area below. So notice how I'm looking up into here, right? I'm looking up at this, looking down at this. And this is where some chairs might go as well. So do a little bit of planning on your work, figuring out where your horizon line, where some of those elements might go before you start drawing. I think it'll be really helpful. And there are a lot of different ways of doing this, but I think it's helpful to give yourself that midline first. So I'm gonna hide these guides and make a new one for other guides. Call this one guides 2. And so this is going to be my midline, so that would be that line that I was describing over here. I'm going to say this is my horizon line. And this is my horizon line. So that way it's almost really similar to where my piece is. I can give myself some guidelines if I need. So if I say that's this point here, that one's this point here. And since this is going back in space, it'll actually be the top part. If this is my general sort of building, right? This part back here is going to be a little bit lower because it's going back in perspective. So I don't want to say like, hey, that's my top part here. All right. So again, that'll start to go like that. Boxes, they're our friends. So I'm going to undo a couple of those. This here will be that edge over here. This underneath, that curves around the side, so it's going to be a little farther back. You can, depending on how yours is working, you can copy and paste and warp it in perspective just to see how it might look. But keep in mind that your spaces go back. So some folks will have it where if I go to my lasso tool and select this, right? If I select that, Command J to duplicate it, Command T to move it, right? Watch what happens if I start moving this, and I'm gonna right click, go to distort. If I move this back in space, right, as if I'm going towards my horizon line, one of the things that is a little wonky about doing it like this is notice that I lose the perspective of this going back and this going back and this going back into here, because if it is supposed to be going back, right, in space, draw this here, draw this here, then this area here is going to be back, right? And that gets too foreshortened. So I might want to have, right, I'm doing this very loosely right now, right? If that's going back in space, these are my areas here, right? This is my outside sort of edge over here. This is my outside sort of edge. And I think it's good to do, like, you do one rough pass, right? But you can see the difference of this angle here and this here. This feels like it actually goes back into the space as opposed to feeling like it just is fake. And again, these little circles that are up here are lights, and you want those to actually feel like they're in dimension. Same thing with this side, right? There is a big door on this. And one thing that could be helpful is just thinking about your overall sort of floor plan as you're going along, right? You might need to do a top view to see what your piece looks like or what your space looks like. But over here, I've got my door on the side. And so if I look at where my door on my side is, right, what's interesting is I start to look at this and say, actually, look at where this door is. There's a little bit of space. Let's close this off. There's a little bit of space in between here and here. But if I look at this, right, that feels like it's actually going out on this behind those windows. So I might need to either take my door or my big window that's on the opening here, push it forward a little bit. Like so. And then if I look at this guy, this might need to get pushed back in space a little bit more. Command T. So it is a bit of a push and a pull, right? As we're going through this. Because I would actually see a little bit of that doorway going in. So maybe, right, I would need something a little bit more like that. But again, I was going to start actually using this over here. But it's good to start to compare and contrast the parts you might need as you're going along. But you can start to see how this would come together. All right. So let's actually do it on this side over here. I'm gonna erase this stuff. A lot of marks. Command D. And I want to get rid of this one. This is gonna be my So this is the beginning of my drawing, right? As I was saying before, you might give yourself a little bit of an overhead floor plan just so you can start to see where your piece might go. So if I look at this, mine is a box, right, to begin with. It's a little bit longer. I've got this on top up here. I've got the stair walkway. I've got this little outcrop that's here. And I might make this side, I've got the little windows that are down over here that are a little bit further back. This is a little bit further back. If I think about where that might start, this is going to these windows here, those start at about the point that I want that to end. So this can kind of help. This is the dome, right? This is the back side of the windows. This is the point that's facing us. So I kind of need to figure out, like, what does this part look like? Is it just more of this building? Is it windows? Some things are going to be open as you're thinking about it and designing. But that's part of the fun of this process. So if you need to, give yourself an overhead plan just a little bit before, and there is that little bit of a window right there, right? I'll actually start a little bit there. And this is good because you can then say halfway through this window is where the edge of this guy is. And I wouldn't have known that unless I actually drew this out. So to start out, right, this is my corner. So I'm going to give myself one straight line. That's there. Let's push this over. Let's not do this on my overhead plan. Let's give myself black for this. And I like using pencil. So there's my front. My vanishing point might be way off to the side over here. So again, you can always give yourself more room or zoom in. So I'm going to give myself and say this edge is over here, just so I have a little bit more to give back. So if I then think about, okay, if this is top edge, that feels like enough room. And you can always shrink this down, right? So if this is my vanishing point, that's going to go all the way out over here. And then I have to think about, okay, if that's the vanishing point there, this is the bottom of that face. This is going to go generally right about there. And actually, my horizon line is here. So let's undo that real quick. I'm going to make this a little bit steeper. I'm going to say that's the back edge. So if that's coming over here. Right. So if this is the top, again, loose to begin with, and then you can always add more detail. So then I know that this is going to have this interior part and this back part. This is going to have a little bit, right, this inside face. As it goes, right? This backside, I might say that it goes to about here. So there is like a little bit of guesswork involved. That might be as too sort of small, right? So maybe it's the same as that. So that means that my vanishing point is super far out. So maybe I'm going to make it over here just so we have something to work with. So it's not too crazy. So if that's the general start to my box, right? This inside part, that's going to go there, right? So that's going to be this part right here. And this is where I then get to determine, how far in does it go? Maybe it goes like that. And so here, this part, this line, and come there. That might be a little bit too sharp. Going in. And that's, so this would be about where my window goes to right here. And if I look at this, that helps me determine where this outside door or outside large sort of window should go. All right. So then I can start to see this part is 1, 2, 3. So if I divide that, 1, 2, 3. Well, there's 1 in the middle, so that makes that halfway between here, halfway between there, and halfway there. If I look, that comes to about midway through the door. So 1, 2. And this you might see a little bit through that door, right? And this you might see a little bit of that edge of the door, or of the side of that window. And this guy you might not actually see. That might be a little bit hidden, depending. It's a little bit tight to that edge. It's a little awkward. So then once you start to get this part, right, this is going to, has this little awning. So again, using our vanishing point, where it's going to go. Oop. And then same thing on this side. We're going to start to think like, okay, if this is my base down here, right, this is our corner underneath. And I know that this goes out a little bit wider. And you don't have to stay totally true to your plan. You can deviate. If you think something's getting a little off, you think like you don't like the aesthetics of it, you can totally go off from it and say I want this to just be equal with the back part here. So if this comes down to about here, right, and then I think this is my vanishing point, back over that way, back over that way, right? This is going to come down a little bit. And again, this is first pass. This is not the end all of your work, right? And so I want this to be inset a little bit. But now that we're below the horizon line, I might see a little bit of this overhang, right? So if I come back and I start thinking about the connection between here and that line, right? I'm going to see a little bit of that front. And same thing over here, right? This comes down and it meets almost where that door, this point here. So that is where that sort of edge is, right there. But because this guy, this side is going to meet in the front, I would want to use that line. So that's actually going to start inside there. This point over here. At a certain point, you might just let go. Just say, okay. And I did add in this little bit of the overhang, just because I thought that might be a little bit nice. And so here, I would then think about how I want this side to go back underneath. So again, I can, and you can always use, there we go, there we go. So that's starting to look like we've got it underneath, coming back. These are way inset. I might only see a little bit of it. This one comes up about through that part right there, right? That's a little bit more, so it's actually going to be this side. See a little bit of that there. We're going to see a little bit of that under area right here. See a little bit of those steps. Again, verticals. You can always start with the ramp and then build off if you need it. Just to get your sort of placement. And here you would then look and see this is sort of midway between those shapes. Let's go up. And you still have to think about tangents as you're going along. So you maybe don't want it to intersect, so you can always adjust as you go. And I'm going to delete out some of my lines. All right. So then going through, this is much further back. This guy much further back. And this one starts maybe back here. So when we're looking at it, right, you might see it's it almost looks horizontal as it's going to it. These two actually meet. If I look at this, it might be that this actually comes out a little bit further, but you could keep it as you like it. It's up to you. Like maybe I want to see a little bit more of this one. Show that it's a little bit more in front. So again, they go down, and that starts to come together as I'm thinking about, right? Because as this goes towards this space, this goes towards this space, right? And then I start to think about where I might need my poles, just towards the middle. This one. As it's further away from us, right, it starts to make it feel a little bit longer. And maybe I do want this to actually just come straight down to that point. Maybe I do want this just to meet that area there. That might just work out a little bit better. It can go there we go. I think that'll actually be a little bit better. Again, first pass, just so you're starting to get those elements there. Just your pieces in place. And this could be, right, even though I'm not seeing it right now, this could have a series of windows on this side. This was something that was in one of my original sketches, but I kind of like the way that might start to come together. So you can always let it sort of the process inform you. You don't have to stay exactly how the piece was. So down over here, I've got two. These guys, sort of motif. It's almost like a piece motif, right? Again, just getting my placement sort of down. Right, these are my outside sort of windows. So this is going to be, that's going to continue on the inside of that window. You might see just a little bit of that inside there, just to give yourself a little bit of detail. And then I've got my dome on top. So that dome is going to be top up here. There we go. So it's going to start, if I look, it comes offset a little bit. And then it goes to the side, maybe to about here. That top is over here. So again, I can think, how's that part going to be? Right, so we're only going to see it from the bottom. So you could, if you needed to, right? If this is my box, this part is going over like that. And that gives you sort of enough to work with, right? Again, first pass. It's an outside area. It's my wood, right? Using the sort of wood that was from the forest. Just give myself a bit of definition. This is also inside there. And that starts to get you there, right? Where you have your outer elements. If I hide my guides real quick. Right? Oop. And since I didn't add in any of the little back foot pedestals, let's add that back in real quick. This is my sort of guide again, right? I would have this little area underneath, right? These little bit of pedestals. And this one maybe comes out a little too far, right? Use your guide if you need it. Yeah, that definitely came out way too far. But from here, you kind of got enough to go off of to then work towards your overall sort of structure, adding in your details under windows, all this kind of stuff. Cleaning it up as you go along, right? What's interesting is those sort of elements are going to also be in perspective. So, right, these guys, as we look at them straight on, they're going to be that way. But if we turn this or we curve it, not curve, we put it in perspective, that means that this will still be in the middle, this one will be closer to us, this one will be further. So there's going to be a slight angle to it as we go. And I do want them to meet. So let's actually get that. There we go. And then for the bookshelves on the inside, I would add a layer underneath my windows here, just so that way they are starting to work. But I think this gives you enough to sort of go on for now as you're working. Make that bigger. Just so you can start to see once you start adding shading, right? And we're going to use this as our way of, as the one that we start to paint with. That's where it makes a lot more sense once you start painting it in, painting in some of those elements. This would be a little bit in shadow there. This would be in shadow underneath. Because it's underneath. Cool. So that's how a lot of that starts to come together. Right. Depending on where your light source is coming from, you might get a little bit of that sort of cross shading. This will be a little bit darker underneath. Right. Just underneath there. So hopefully this helps out a little bit in terms of thinking about how to structure your forms, how to edit your work. Oh, let's go underneath there. Yeah, there we go. How to structure your forms, how to make it slightly more interesting, how to start to work with perspective. So this will be sort of your work for today, spending an hour on this as you're going along, adding more detail as we get towards Friday. But this should give you enough of a place to sort of get started on your projects. Reach out with any emails, questions, any of that good stuff. And thanks for your patience while I got this to you.